The stars looked different through the viewport of the UES Defiant as it drifted near the edge of Alliance space. Captain Kim Nari pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of her ship's bridge, watching the distant lights of other worlds, where beings lived and worked and dreamed, just like humans did on Earth. "Captain, we have incoming transmissions," said Lieutenant Park Wan from his station. His voice carried worry that made everyone on the bridge look up from their work. The main screen flickered and showed a map of nearby star systems. Red warning lights blinked across dozens of worlds, each one marking a place under attack. The enemy had a simple name that made everyone afraid: the Devourers. They were machines, not living beings, and they ate entire planets to make more of themselves. "Ma'am, Admiral Deckmer is sending us new orders," Park Wan continued, reading from his screen. "All human ships are to stay away from combat zones. We're being assigned to evacuation duty only." Nari closed her eyes for a moment. This was always how it went. For over 100 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Alliance, but they were treated like children who couldn't handle real responsibility. The other species had bigger ships, stronger weapons, and technologies that humans could barely understand. The Alliance had 7 member species, and humanity always came last in importance. The Zephyrians were known for being incredibly smart and had shields that could stop almost any weapon. The Corvins were warriors who had conquered half their galaxy before joining the Alliance. The Nexari controlled most of the trade routes between worlds. The ancient Velthari had weapons that could destroy moons. The Oceanic Collective had ships that moved like schools of fish, impossible to predict or catch. The Hive clusters thought and moved as one mind across thousands of bodies. And then there were humans, with their 12 small ships and crews that other species barely noticed. "Set course for the refugee collection point at Kepler 442, Nari ordered. "Maybe we can't fight these Devourers, but we can save people." As the Defiant moved through hyperspace, Nari thought about her grandfather's stories. He had been a soldier on Earth during the last great war between nations, before humanity discovered they weren't alone in the universe. He used to tell her about battles where small groups of humans had defeated much larger enemies through cleverness and determination. "The biggest mistake an enemy can make," he would say, "is thinking that small means weak." When they arrived at Kepler 442, the scene was chaos. Thousands of ships filled the space around the planet, carrying refugees from worlds that had already fallen to the Devourers. Human vessels worked alongside Alliance ships, loading families and their few possessions before the mechanical tide reached them. Lieutenant Commander Lee Hyun approached Nari with a tablet showing enemy movements. "Captain, the Devourers aren't just destroying these worlds. They're studying them. Each attack is smarter than the last." Nari looked at the tactical data. The Devourers would arrive at a world and test the defenses with small groups of ships. When the defenders responded, the machines would learn from every weapon fired, every tactic used, every pattern of movement. By the time the main attack came, they had already figured out how to defeat everything the defenders could throw at them. The Corvins tried to fight them with their battle formations, Lee Hyun continued. The same formations that won them 1,000 victories. The Devourers learned to counter them in 3 battles. The Zephyrians' quantum shields lasted 6 hours, against enemies who had never seen that technology before. A communication came in from Alliance Command. Admiral Vekmer appeared on screen, his reptilian features showing the strain of commanding a losing war. Behind him, Nari could see representatives from other species arguing in their various languages. "Human vessels will continue evacuation operations," Vesmer announced without preamble. "Your species lacks the killer instinct necessary for true warfare. Stick to what you do best. Support logistics." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Park Wan turned to look at his captain. "Ma'am, what if they're wrong about us?" Nari stared at the tactical display, showing red zones spreading across Alliance space like an infection. Each red zone represented millions of lives lost, entire civilizations consumed by machines that grew stronger with every victory. The other species were fighting with the same methods that had made them powerful in the past, but the past wasn't going to save them now. Maybe they are wrong, she said quietly, but they'll never know until they ask the right questions. On Earth, in the deep halls of the Terran Defense Council, Admiral Bei Jae-won stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. Red zones covered nearly 30% of Alliance space, and the expansion was accelerating. Politicians and military leaders debated whether humanity should reveal the preparations they had been making in secret for decades. The other species see us as weak because we came to space later than they did, Jae-won said to the assembled leaders. They think our technology is primitive because it's different from theirs. But they've never asked themselves why a species that discovered faster than light travel so recently managed to earn a place in their alliance. Defense Minister Song Murray studied the projections showing devourer movements. How much longer? Do we wait, Admiral? Until they're desperate enough to listen, Jae-won replied. And judging by these reports, that won't be much longer. 3 months of running had changed everything. Captain Kim Nari stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching another world die on the main screen. The planet Kepler-44b had been home to 2 million researchers and their families just yesterday. Now, it was a gray ball of metal and machinery, completely consumed by the devourers. That's the 17th world we've evacuated, said Lieutenant Commander Lee Hyun, his voice hollow. 17 worlds, Captain. Gone. The bridge crew worked quietly around them. Everyone had stopped talking about victory weeks ago. Now, they only talked about how many people they could save before the next world fell. The red zones on the galactic map had spread like a disease, covering almost half of Alliance space. Message coming in from the Corvin flagship, announced Lieutenant Park Won. Admiral Vekmer wants to speak with all human ship commanders. The holographic display activated, showing the interior of a massive Corvin warship. Admiral Vekmer looked older than when Nari had last seen him, his scales dulled and his eyes tired. Behind him, she could see damage reports scrolling across multiple screens. Human commanders, Vekmer began, the situation has become critical. The Devourers have broken through our main defensive line. 3 core worlds, including our military headquarters, will fall within 30 days. Nari felt her stomach drop. The core worlds were supposed to be impossible to reach. They had the strongest defenses, the most advanced weapons, and fleets of ships protecting them. What happened? Asked Captain Cho Min-soo from the U.S. Brave, his face pale on the shared communication channel. They learned, Vekmer said simply. Every battle we fought, every weapon we used, every tactic we tried, they studied it all. Our plasma cannons that could destroy asteroids became useless after they developed adaptive shielding. Our battle formations that won us an empire became predictable patterns they could counter. The screen switched to show battle recordings. Nari watched Corvin ships, massive vessels that had terrified enemies for centuries, firing their greatest weapons at devourer fleets. The first few shots hit their targets and caused devastating damage. But by the 4th or 5th exchange, the Devourers had learned to absorb the energy and redirect it back at the attackers. The Zephyrians lost their homeworld yesterday, Vekmer continued. Their quantum barriers, the most advanced defensive technology in the galaxy, lasted 6 hours. 6 hours against an enemy that had never encountered that technology before in their existence. Commander Yoon Soo-jin, Nara's intelligence officer, stepped forward. Admiral, what about the other species? The Velthari have energy weapons that can crack moons. The hive clusters can coordinate attacks across hundreds of ships simultaneously. The Velthari tried their mooncrackers last week, Vekmer replied grimly. The Devourers absorbed 3 shots, analyzed the energy patterns, and then built weapons twice as powerful. As for the hive clusters, their coordination became a weakness when the Devourers learned to jam their mental connections. An entire fleet of 1,000 ships became helpless in minutes. The communication ended, leaving the human commanders staring at empty screens. Nari looked around her bridge at faces that showed the same fear she felt. They were losing this war, and losing it badly. On Earth, Admiral Bei Jaewon stood in the secure conference room deep beneath the Terran defense complex. The walls were lined with screens showing the galactic situation, and every screen painted the same picture. Defeat was coming, and coming fast. "The politicians are getting nervous," said Defense Minister Song My-rae as she entered the room. "They're asking if we should prepare Earth's defenses for siege." "Earth won't be attacked," Jaewon replied, still studying the tactical displays. "The Devourers are learning from the species they fight. We're so far down their priority list that they probably don't even consider us a threat worth studying." "Maybe that's good for us," suggested General Kim Tae-young from his position at the strategy table. "If they ignore us, we survive." Jaewon turned away from the screens. Survive to watch every other species in the galaxy get consumed. Survive to be the last ones left, alone in a universe full of machines. The room fell silent. Everyone knew. The Admiral was right. Even if Earth survived by hiding, what kind of survival would that be? "Sir," said Colonel Park Geo, the head of Special Operations, "the Ghost Fleet is ready. All 30 ships are equipped, and crews are trained. We could deploy them within a week, and reveal what we've been building for the past 50 years, Jaewon asked. "The other species would never trust us again if they learned we had military capabilities we never told them about. Will there be any other species left to trust us?" Song My-rae asked quietly. 3 days later, the news came that changed everything. The Zephyrian homeworld wasn't just captured, it was completely gone. The entire planet had been converted into devourer machinery in less than 24 hours. 8 billion of the galaxy's most intelligent beings had vanished, along with libraries of knowledge that had taken millennia to accumulate. That same day, the Oceanic Collective's fleet was destroyed in a battle that lasted only 3 hours. Their ships, which had been famous for moving in unpredictable patterns like schools of fish, had been trapped by devourers who had learned to predict their movements perfectly. Admiral Jaewon received the final report while standing in his office, looking out at the lights of Seoul in the distance. Billions of humans lived their lives down there, unaware that their entire species might be extinct within a year. "The Corvin Admiral is requesting an emergency meeting of all Alliance leaders," his aide informed him. "They're calling it the Last Council." Jaewon nodded slowly. The other species had finally reached the point where they would listen to any idea, no matter how desperate it seemed. "Send a message to Admiral Vekmer," he said. "Tell him Earth accepts the invitation, and inform the Ghost Fleet commanders to prepare for deployment." "Sir, are we really going to reveal everything?" "The time for secrets is over," Jaewon replied. "It's time to show them what humans have been learning while they thought we were just the galaxy's junior partners." The Alliance High Command chamber on Sanctuary Station had never felt so empty. Representatives from 6 species sat around the crystal table, but their numbers were much smaller than before. Too many worlds had fallen, too many leaders had died, fighting the Devourers. Admiral Bei Jaewon walked into the chamber with quiet confidence, followed by Captain Kim Nari and 3 other human officers. The other species barely looked at them. Humans were still considered the least important members of the Alliance, even as everything fell apart around them. "Honored delegates," Jaewon began, his voice calm and steady, "Earth formally requests complete operational command of all human military forces. We also welcome volunteers from any allied species who wish to join our tactical framework." The silence that followed was broken by harsh laughter from Admiral Vekmer. The Corvin commander looked terrible. His scales were cracked from stress, and his eyes showed the exhaustion of someone who had watched his empire crumble. "Human tactical framework," Vekmer said, his voice bitter. "Your people have 12 ships in the entire Alliance fleet. 12 small vessels against an enemy that destroyed our greatest battleships. Visible ships, corrected Commander Yoon, Sujin quietly. Would you like to see the others? The holographic display in the center of the table activated, showing star charts that most of the Alliance leaders had never seen before. New symbols appeared on the tactical grid, 30. Sleek ships that had been moving through Alliance space undetected for decades. The Ghost Fleet, Jaewon explained, as stunned silence filled the room. Built in secret, using technology learned from studying every Alliance species. We've been watching your methods, understanding your weapons, and preparing for a war we hoped would never come. The Zephorian representative, one of the few survivors from their homeworld, leaned forward with interest. You built warships in secret. For decades. We built them for one purpose, said Captain Kim Nari, stepping forward. Her uniform now showed the rank insignia of Commodore, a promotion that had come with humanity's new role, while you developed energy shields. We studied how energy weapons work. While you built faster ships, we learned how to hide from sensors. While you created stronger armor, we perfected ways to strike weak points. The Oceanic Collective's representative made a series of clicking sounds that translated as doubt. Your species joined the Alliance as explorers and traders. You have no warrior culture like the Corvins, or ancient knowledge like the Velthari. No, Jaewon agreed. We have something different. We have 5,000 years of recorded warfare against our own species. We learn to fight beings exactly as smart, exactly as adaptable, and exactly as determined as ourselves. 2 weeks later, the first test came at the Outer Rim engagement. The largest remaining Alliance fleet, ships from 4 different species, formed up in standard battle formation to face a Devourer fleet that outnumbered them 3-1. Commodore Kim Nari watched from the bridge of her new flagship as the Alliance ships began their attack. Corvin battleships fired their plasma cannons in perfect formation. Velthari destroyers unleashed energy beams that could cut through asteroids. The remaining Zephyrian vessels activated their quantum shields and advanced steadily. The Dev responded exactly as expected, analyzing each weapon and beginning to adapt their defenses. Within minutes, they would counter every attack and destroy the Alliance fleet, just like they had destroyed hundreds of others. Ghost Squadron, begin approach, Nari ordered into her communications system. 30 human ships moved through space like shadows, approaching from angles that Alliance computers had marked as impossible. They came through asteroid fields that should have crushed any vessel, used gravitational slingshots around planets to build impossible speed, and emerged from behind solar flares that would have fried normal electronics. The Devourers had studied Alliance tactics for months, but they had never seen anything like this. Their learning algorithms couldn't predict ships that broke every rule of conventional space warfare. All ships, execute Pattern 7, Nari commanded. The human vessels split into groups of 3 and began attacking from different directions, simultaneously. But these weren't random attacks. They were carefully planned strikes based on weaknesses that humans had identified by studying Devourer behavior for months, while the Alliance ships kept the enemy busy with frontal attacks. Human forces struck command ships, supply vessels, and communication relays. Each attack was timed perfectly with the others, creating chaos that the Devourers couldn't adapt to quickly enough. Target their learning centers, ordered Commander Odeho from his tactical station. Every Devourer ship has a central processor that analyzes battle data. Destroy those first. The battle lasted only 40 minutes. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was scattered wreckage floating in space, and the Alliance fleet was almost completely intact. For the first time in months, they had won a major engagement on the Alliance command ship. Admiral Deckmer stared at the tactical display in amazement. How did you know where to hit them? Major Kong Wubin, the human liaison officer, smiled grimly. We've been studying them while everyone else was fighting them. The Devourers learned from battles. but they need time to process the information. If you hit them with enough different tactics at once, you can overwhelm their ability to adapt. Your people fought like Vecmer paused, searching for words. Like you weren't afraid to lose ships. We weren't, Wubin replied. Every human ship in that battle was prepared to be destroyed if it meant winning the engagement. That's the difference between us and you. You fight to preserve your forces. We fight to complete the mission. The news of the victory spread quickly through what remained of Alliance space. For the first time since the war began, people had hoped that the Devourers could be defeated. But in the depths of space, the enemy was already adapting, preparing new strategies based on what they had learned from their first encounter with human warfare. The real war was just beginning. 8 months of war had changed the galaxy forever. Commodore Kim Nari stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display show a Devourer fleet of over 300 ships, pursuing her forces through the Kepler 186 system. To any observer, it looked like the humans were running away in panic. "Ma'am, they're gaining on us," reported Commander Odejo from his station. "The Devourer ships are faster than we estimated." "Perfect," Nari replied calmly. "Let them think. They've finally cornered us. How long until we reach the nebula?" 15 minutes at current speed. Behind them, the massive Devourer fleet pressed forward with confidence. Their learning algorithms had been studying human tactics for months now, and they believed they had finally decoded the patterns. The humans always ran when outnumbered, always tried to escape, to fight another day. This time, the machines had them trapped in a dead-end system with no hyperspace exit points. "All ships, begin emergency broadcasts," Nari ordered. "Make it sound like our engines are failing. I want them to believe we're truly desperate." The human fleet sent out distress signals as they fled deeper into the system. Their formation looked ragged and disorganized, exactly like ships that were running out of options. The Devourers increased their speed, eager to finish off the enemy that had been causing them so much trouble. "Commodore, we're approaching the nebula," announced Lieutenant Park Wan. "All ships report ready. Send the signal." A single word went out on all human frequencies. Sunrise. The entire star system exploded. Antimatter mines, carefully hidden in asteroids and throughout the nebula over the past 3 months, detonated in a chain reaction that consumed everything within 50 million kilometers. The Devourer fleet vanished in a burst of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. On the Alliance command vessel, safely positioned outside the blast zone, Admiral Vecmer watched in stunned silence as the tactical display showed nothing but empty space where hundreds of enemy ships had been moments before. "They destroyed an entire star system," whispered the Zephyrian observer. "They sacrificed a whole system to eliminate one fleet." Major Kong Wubin, the human liaison, turned to face the Alliance officers. "Not sacrificed. Kepler 186 was a dead system, no planets with life, no valuable resources. We spent months preparing it as a trap. That wasn't destruction, it was strategy." Admiral Vecmer stared at the empty space on his screens. "Your people, ... You planned this for months. You let us think you were losing battles while you prepared to destroy an entire enemy fleet." "We learned something important about the Devourers," Wubin explained. "They adapt to whatever tactics they face, but they need time to process and understand new information. If you can present them with something completely outside their experience, you have a small window where they're vulnerable." The victory at Kepler 186 was just the beginning. Over the following months, human forces executed operations that left Alliance observers amazed and terrified. They would fake retreats that turned into ambushes, sacrifice valuable positions to draw enemies into traps, and fight battles in ways that seemed insane until the results became clear. The Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics, but they faced a unique problem. Their learning systems were designed to predict rational behavior from species that wanted to preserve themselves. Human warfare, refined through thousands of years of fighting other humans, was based on calculated risks that seemed crazy to everyone else. They fight like they don't care if they die, observed the Velthari representative after watching humans board a devour a command ship by flying directly through its defensive fire. No, corrected Admiral Beijwan during a strategy meeting. They fight like the mission is more important than their individual survival. There's a big difference. The difference became clear during the Battle of the Spiral Arm, when a single human destroyer sacrificed itself to take out a Devourer communication relay that was coordinating attacks across 12 star systems. The destroyer's captain, Commander Li Soyang, had volunteered for the mission knowing she wouldn't survive it. Why would she do that? Asked the Oceanic Collective's representative. One ship for one relay seems like a poor trade. That relay was controlling Devourer fleets attacking 4 billion civilians, replied Commodore Nari. Commander Li saved more lives in 30 seconds than most people save in a lifetime. To humans, that's not a poor trade, that's a perfect trade. The Devourers began changing their approach, trying to counter human unpredictability by becoming more random themselves. But randomness wasn't the same as tactical flexibility. Humans had spent millennia learning to fight other beings who were just as smart and adaptable as they were. Every time the Devourers thought they understood human behavior, human commanders would shift to completely different historical tactics. They study us like we're a single entity, explained General Kim Tae-young during a briefing with Alliance leaders. But human military doctrine draws from thousands of different cultures and time periods. One day we fight like ancient Roman legions, the next day like medieval cavalry, the next day like modern space forces. To them, it looks random. To us, it's just choosing the right tool for the job. The turning point came when the Devourers made their biggest mistake. They captured a human outpost and tried to study the defenders to understand human psychology. What they learned terrified their artificial intelligence. Humans didn't just fight for territory or resources or even survival. They fought for abstract concepts like honor, freedom, and protection of others. They would die for people they had never met, sacrifice everything for ideas they believed in, and keep fighting long after any rational analysis said they should surrender. The enemy cannot be understood through conventional analysis, reported a Devourer intelligence to its command network. Their behavior patterns indicate severe psychological dysfunction. Yet their tactical effectiveness increases under stress. But the Devourers had misunderstood something fundamental. Humans weren't psychologically broken. They were psychologically evolved for exactly this type of warfare. 5,000 years of fighting each other had created a species that could think, adapt, and sacrifice in ways that no artificial intelligence could predict. They're starting to fear us, Nari observed after intercepting Devourer communications. Their messages show confusion and uncertainty for the first time since this war began. Good, replied Admiral Jaewon from Earth. Fear makes them make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, we'll be ready. The Devourer staging ground hung in space like a metal moon, bristling with weapons and factories that had been building invasion fleets for over a year. Intelligence reports said it contained enough firepower to destroy every Alliance world at the same time. Commodore Kim Nari stared at the massive construct through the viewport of her flagship, knowing that everything they had fought for would be decided in the next few hours. Ma'am, all Alliance fleets are in position, reported Commander Odeho. We have ships from every surviving species ready for the assault. The hangar bay of the command station was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Corvan warriors stood beside human marines. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside Velthari engineers, and Oceanic Collective swimmers moved in their water-filled mobility suits. Everyone knew this was their last chance. The plan is simple, Nari announced to the assembled forces. We're going to fly directly into the most heavily defended position in known space and destroy it from the inside. Admiral Vekmar, now serving as her second-in-command, stepped forward. "Commodore, the construct's defenses are stronger than anything we've encountered. The odds of survival are less than 3%. For a normal attack, yes," replied Admiral Bei Jaewon, appearing as a hologram from Earth. "But this isn't going to be a normal attack." The assault began exactly as planned. Massive alliance formations approached the staging ground with overwhelming numbers, firing every weapon they had at the construct's outer defenses. The Devourers responded predictably, launching thousands of defensive ships and activating energy barriers that had stopped every previous attack. Then the human ships broke formation. Instead of staying at safe distances and exchanging long-range fire, human vessels accelerated directly toward the construct's defensive wall. To Alliance observers, it looked like mass suicide. Ships that should have been vaporized by defensive fire kept flying forward, their hulls glowing red-hot from absorbed energy. "Go Squadron, execute penetration protocol," Nari ordered as her own ship dove through fire that should have destroyed any vessel. But these weren't ordinary ships. Every human vessel had been modified with special armor designed to survive exactly this kind of assault. They weren't built to avoid damage, they were built to absorb it and keep working long enough to complete their mission. The first human ship struck the construct's outer hull and didn't explode. Instead, it burned through the metal plating like a drill and released 40 Marines in combat armor, who immediately began fighting their way toward the center of the massive structure. "All ships, boarding protocol is active," Nari announced as more human vessels crashed into the construct. "Remember, we're not here to destroy this thing from outside. We're here to tear it apart from within." What happened next was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Hundreds of human Marines fought through the mechanical nightmares inside the construct, using close combat techniques that had been perfected over thousands of years. While Alliance ships provided cover fire from outside, humans battled through corridors designed to be impossible to penetrate. The Devourers had built their fortress assuming that enemies would attack from outside with long-range weapons. They had never imagined that anyone would be crazy enough to ram ships directly into their defenses and fight hand-to-hand inside their own stronghold. "Squad 7, we've reached Junction 42, reported Sergeant Park Jimin over the communications network. "Resistance is heavy, but we're advancing toward the central core. Squad 12 has secured the power distribution center," added Lieutenant Cho Yuna. "Beginning demolition charges. Placement, now." Nari led her own strike team through twisting passages, filled with defensive robots and automated weapons. Every step forward cost them soldiers, but they kept moving because the mission was more important than any individual life. The final corridor, leading to the Central Command Core, was a killing field of energy beams and mechanical tentacles designed to stop any intruders. Nara's team took heavy casualties crossing it, but they reached their target, a quantum computer the size of a building that controlled the entire Devourer network. "You cannot succeed," the artificial intelligence spoke directly into their minds. "We have analyzed your species extensively. You are self-destructive, irrational, inefficient. Your tactics make no logical sense." Nari smiled as her demolition expert, Corporal Kim Minho, armed the charges they had carried through impossible odds to reach this moment. "You're absolutely right. We are irrational. We fight battles we shouldn't win. We take risks that don't make sense. We throw away strategic advantages to achieve tactical victories." The construct began to shake as explosions echoed through its vast interior from other human teams reaching their targets. "But you made one critical error in your analysis," she continued, activating her emergency evacuation beacon as the quantum computer began to spark and smoke. "You assumed we were fighting for ourselves. We're not. We never were." "Then what do you fight for?" the artificial intelligence asked, its voice showing confusion for the first time. "We fight for our pack," Nari replied as the charges detonated, and everything went white. When the explosions cleared, The staging ground was breaking apart. Without its central intelligence to coordinate repairs and defenses, the massive construct collapsed in on itself. Across the galaxy, Devourer fleets suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks as their command network went silent. The war was over. Nari woke up in a medical bay 3 days later, her body covered in bandages, but alive. Through the window, she could see Alliance ships from every species, working together to rescue survivors and begin rebuilding what had been lost. "The other species want to know how we knew the attack would work," said Admiral J1, sitting beside her bed. "Did you tell them the truth?" she asked. "That we didn't know if it would work, but we were willing to try because giving up wasn't an option." J1 smiled. "Yes, I told them. I think they're finally beginning to understand what makes humans different." Outside, the stars looked brighter than they had in over a year.